Um, I do want to let you guys know that this training is provided to you by the Nebraska Department of Education, and Amber is with the Nebraska Department of Education. What did you say? You're the Aware Grant Program Specialist. So she is being so incredibly helpful. I couldn't do this without her. Also, this is grant funded by the Department of Health and Human Services, Substance Abuse, Mental Health. So SAMHSA, right? SAMHSA and their grants, they love to fund things. So again, today we're talking about how to have difficult conversations. I know so often many of you know how to have these conversations, and or you find yourself in those conversations more often than you would care to be involved in them. This is just kind of my way of giving you a lot of different techniques and insights, maybe a little mind change. Feel free to take what resonates and leave the rest. This isn't one way, shape, or form. Every way fits each person. And ooh, we have so many great people already. Hi, everybody. I found this quote recently and I really, really liked it. What happens if we honor the conflict in our life and what the conflict can help us do and how it can help us grow? If we're always trying to maintain peace and equanimity, we don't actually get into the place where the conflict of the moment actually moves into a position to be more dynamically invested in our growth. I love that because I feel like difficult conversations should truly be called growth conversations. Far too often we focus on the negatives of life rather than the positives. You know, our glass remains half empty rather than half full because we get so caught up and we get so overwhelmed that it's really hard to see the positive sometimes. And it's also really uncomfortable to sit within that growth. So it's easier to just call it difficult and cast it aside, or find somebody else to blame, like you're the reason this is a difficult conversation, rather than truly looking inward at the growth opportunities that are afforded both us and the person we're having this conversation with. Sometimes I know we're like, I just like to chill out and not have to grow anymore at this point in my life. I literally just said this to my husband, like, can I just stop having to heal? Like, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of the constant, like, oh, here's another childhood wound that I have to confront. Great, yay me. But that's really the beauty of life, is that growth is unavoidable. And, you know, whether we welcome it into our lives or not, it's going to happen. And it's what the whole human journey is truly all about. So for those of you who are just joining, for those of you who are already here, I am Angie Stevens. I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker, and I'm super excited to have this conversation with you today. It's one of my favorite topics, and it's actually one of my favorite things to do. I love to have difficult conversations, which I don't know, maybe makes me psycho. I don't know. My mom has schizophrenia and bipolar, so you can be the judge. Couple fun facts about me. I am a karaoke champion, like legit. I'm not just like, I'm really good getting up there. I actually have won and no, I won two. There was one that I should have also won, but you know, that's a story for another day. I have a podcast. My best friend and I interview guests and discuss various mental health topics. If you listen to it already, yay, thanks. Leave a review. We could use those. If you don't and you're interested, cool. The earlier episodes, little rough with the sound. Just want to give you a little forewarning. I also was in the Thanksgiving Macy's Day Parade. Are there any cloggers here? Please. Nope, no one. Oh, that's all right. One time I did give a presentation and there was one clogger in the audience and I about lost my mind. She was also at the Macy's Day Parade in '95. So exciting. The courageous conversation is the one that you don't want to have, right? That's the difficult conversation. That's that growth conversation. So I want to try something. Bear with me, guys. I want to do a poll. So hopefully this works, but I kind of want to hear from you. What are some of your ideas of what a difficult conversation looks like. And there is no right or wrong answer, honestly. It can be anything. Some of us could be, more introverted, and a difficult conversation could be the small talk at the gas station with the clerk, right? Some of us could be a lot more outspoken. So a difficult conversation could be with somebody who is like pulling teeth to get them to even share their inner thoughts and feelings. So difficult is really in the eye of the beholder. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call it. So hit enter if you started typing something. I don't know if you guys can see this, but needing to change current practices. Yeah, that could be a difficult conversation for sure. Instructing students to follow dress code. Oh yeah, they don't want to follow that at all. Ones where the truth will likely cause some pain for the person who you're talking to. That's a big one. That really is a huge one that I hear a lot. Telling a parent their child has a disability. Oh, yeah, especially if the parent probably has the same disability that's undiagnosed. Sending back a wrong order at a restaurant. I know, I'm always afraid that they're going to spit in my food. And those centered around differing viewpoints, spiritual beliefs, moral values, etc. Yeah, don't talk politics at, the Thanksgiving table, right? Those are all really, really great. Such good examples. Let me know if you can't see the regular screen again, but I wrote down just a couple different ideas. And again, these are just a few, but I mean, having a conversation, tell somebody that you have a terminal illness, or even sitting in that conversation with a loved one, loss of a loved one. My now 16-year-old, his mother passed away 4 years ago. And that conversation was really, really difficult to have with him, because it requires you to sit in someone else's pain that you can't solve. I couldn't fix it for him. I could hold space for him, but I couldn't fix it, right? And a lot of these, even like corrective action, telling your supervisee that they have to improve in the way that they do their IEPs, right? That often is a difficult conversation for many supervisors. I had a friend once tell me how much she truly struggled with that. And she is like the softest little nugget on the inside, doesn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, wouldn't hurt a fly. And I really encouraged her to see it from a different perspective and see that she wasn't criticizing. She wasn't telling this person that they were awful or that they were a failure. She was affording them an opportunity to grow, to become better, to improve their paperwork, right? How often do we get caught up in the day-to-day minutia that we don't take that chance? We don't take that opportunity to really look like, am I doing this correct? I assume I'm doing things correctly unless somebody tells me, right? So in that regard, it's a gift that the supervisor is providing them. When we avoid difficult conversations, we trade short-term discomfort for long-term dysfunction. How often, one of you had mentioned the feelings, you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. That often prevents us from having those conversations. And more often than not, us not wanting to have those conversations has more to do with our discomfort than it does the other person's discomfort. Because if I hurt your feelings, then that makes me feel like I'm a bad person, right? Because I don't want to hurt your feelings. Or if you react in an explosive way, then that unpredictability of, wow, I just was trying to help you and now I'm uncomfortable and now you've attacked me. Now we're both uncomfortable, right? Or they, completely just shut off and just no longer talk to you, which I've also had, the Midwest passive aggression, which is, that is something. But all of those unpredictable responses from people make it hard for us to engage in these conversations. But when we avoid, it doesn't actually replace anything, right? I'm not just shoving the dust under the rug and it's gone. The more I shove it under the rug, the more the rug starts billowing over. And at some point, I do have to lift it. We're trading their discomfort for our discomfort, right? I should not also have to be uncomfortable. Neither should you, but that's this dance that we're playing with in life, is finding that balance. Questions to assess. This is, again, I'm just providing a bunch of different tips and techniques. These are things that I often utilize to help me assess whether or not I'm in a right place to have this conversation, or if it's even worth having a conversation. So who are the players involved, right? So are you needing to talk to your colleagues about a concern with their talking about children and families in the hallway? So is that a conversation that you can have directly with them? Is that a conversation you have to take higher? What are the facts, including your personal biases and your emotions surrounding it? Your personal biases is so important. So, if you have dealt with a particular parent and this parent happens to be extremely unreliable in their child's life and often just explodes off the handle or doesn't answer at all. It's like they're unpredictable. So when you're having a difficult conversation with them, what biases do you have? Is it that they're not going to hear me anyway? They're not really going to heed what it is I'm saying, right? So if those are the attitude that you have going into it, it sets up the way it is delivered. When is the best time to address this? I can tell you when I've had a bad day, my husband wanting to talk to me about my disorganization or the fact that I haven't gone through the bills to, pay some of the medical stuff, not the best time. Probably should have read the room, right? So picking the best time to have those conversations is crucial. Where in your body do you feel triggered? I love this one because far too often we don't think ahead about how we can handle these difficult conversations. So when I start to feel triggered, and everybody can, if you don't know where you feel triggered, pay attention. When I start to feel triggered and I'm about to explode, about to, flip my lid, right? That is when in my stomach, it's like this gurgling, like I'm almost like I start to shake. It's different than the nerves when I have to do something that I'm uncomfortable doing. It's more like I'm boiling from the inside. The other body trigger that I have is it's in my throat. Like I can feel just this lump in there and I'm either about to attack. I'm a Scorpio, so I'm about to attack you. And, really I can tear you down with my words if I choose to, or I'm about to just start scream crying and the conversation is no bueno at all. So at that point, I need to excuse myself, or I need to recognize different techniques I can do in order to ground myself, because I can't control the way the other person is going to respond. That's the hardest thing with these difficult conversations. I can't control it. I mentioned that my mom has schizophrenia and bipolar. She's the queen of unpredictable behavior. So I think a lot of the reason I might be more comfortable with this is because I had to learn this technique as a child. I can't predict how you will respond. Even if I know you, I can't predict from one moment to another how you will respond, because I don't know all of the pieces of your puzzle. I don't know all of the perceptions that you might have. One example could be maybe as a child, I was told by my caregiver, you need to, or why do you always make a mess? Why do you always leave such a mess everywhere you go? Told you, ADHD. Okay, so then flash forward, now I have a roommate, and my roommate, same words, but maybe different tone of voice. Hey, why is this mess here? She might be asking with the intention of information seeking, right? But because of where I came from, because of what that feeling does in my emotional body, I might snap at her and she's like, whoa, what the heck? Right? Again, your body remembers. And why is it important to have this conversation? One helpful tip I have is, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's not necessary. If the relationship isn't worth saving, don't worry about having the conversation. Just end the relationship. If the situation doesn't, if you don't think it's going to better anything by having a difficult conversation, don't worry about it, right? Not every difficult conversation has to happen. And how can you approach this to achieve the best possible outcome for all involved? So these are all just a lot of questions that I think are really good to ask yourself before engaging in these growth conversations. And if there's any questions so far or any comments, concerns, again, feel free to use the Q&A, feel free to use the chat box. Across the field of difficult conversations lies serenity. Whatever the outcome's going to be, at least you know. I love this because my grandma always said, hope for the best, plan for the worst. Ask for what you want. And if you don't get it, you're in the same boat you were before. There's the chance you might get it. So having those difficult conversations, it lets you know where the other person lies, where they're at, right? So if you're having a conversation with a parent, several conversations I would have with parents would be about their child who very, 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 very clearly had ADHD and was in a behavioral school. I used to work as a social worker in a behavioral school. Having that conversation about medications was always a really hard one for some parents. And I get it because I know I would have a difficult time, right? I don't want my kids to have to hold on to something or have a crutch that gets them through. I want them to be able to figure things out. But there are times where obviously you need to have that life jacket so they can breathe. But when I had a parent who consistently refused, would become agitated and was like, hell no, I'm not going to go down that road. Okay, now I know that's not an option. So what other techniques and strategies can I now provide this parent where this child can start to feel successful? Many of you know this already, but just some effective communication strategies, because sometimes we forget, we get so caught up in the message that we're wanting to share and the uncomfortability that we feel in our body that we're no longer listening to the other person. I can't tell you how many times I have this argument with my husband of, oh my gosh, you're not even listening to me. He's listening to respond. He's listening to debunk. He's listening to find the holes within my argument that he can then just slip in and tell me I'm wrong, right? My husband's a great guy, I promise. I'm using these examples, but he is a really good guy. Even as a social worker, I sat around so many tables of having IEPs, and oftentimes I would notice parents weren't listening to the discussion because they just felt like they had to, insert whatever they wanted, and they didn't trust that the school could uphold their end of the bargain. But I also saw teachers often, dismissing what the parent was saying or not seeking those clarifying questions in order to get at the heart of, well, why is it so important to you that Tim has one-on-one time with a math teacher every day? What is this for you? Well, I'm really terrible at math. I struggled so hard in so many jobs. I couldn't even do retail, and I don't want that for my child, right? So when we actively listen, we hear beyond what is just being said. But I've been on that other end where it's like, well, we can't practically give you a, one-on-one, hour after hour, day after day math tutor to your child because we don't even have enough staff for our classrooms. So then that's what we're thinking. And then we're no longer listening. It's, well, that's not possible. We can't do it. And then they're getting defensive. It's just back and forth ping pong where nobody's stopping and saying, what is this game? What are the rules of this game we're even playing? What are the goals of this game? What is the outcome that we're wanting to achieve? Because when we can stop and have empathic responses of, hey, man, I can understand that frustration of wanting your son to understand math and not being able to help him because you're so good at helping him with so many other things. I mean, I see how you take care of, his hair, and he tells me stories of how, oh my God, I can't think of anything, but he tells me stories of how helpful you are with cleaning his room at home or helping him, get better at baseball. That you're really good at baseball, aren't you? So it's engaging in that is really what helps minimize a lot of that difficulty that, and provides that growth. And then when we're on the same side, we can look for outside of the box ideas. We don't have the staff to provide this, but gee, there's a lot of math teachers or students studying to be math teachers at UNO. I wonder if we could perhaps partner with UNO and they could come in and provide math tutoring. And then paraphrasing too is so helpful because there's times where I know I communicate one way and somebody hears a completely different thing. And I'm like, whoa, I don't know how you heard that. That's not at all what I meant. And, they could react, they could snap at me. And then it's this argument versus I'm hearing you say blah, blah, blah. No, actually, that's not what I was saying. Let me find different words, right? Again, these are things that all of you know, but they're always good reminders. I like to have the reminders. Another technique for helping have these difficult conversations for, maybe more of you type A or left brain folk is, the DESC model, which is just describe, express, specify, and consequences. So it's describing the behavior in very factual terms. This isn't an emotional thing. This is a factual thing. And this is really good with your unpredictable parents that might use your words against you, because the minute you allow emotions in there, then it can get twisted and it can get messy. But facts stand alone. So, Jerry, the last project we worked on, I did all of the setup for the presentation by myself, and it took me almost an hour. Jerry can't argue with that because Jerry's not me, right? He can attempt to, but those are the facts. The facts are your son comes into class exhausted every single morning and cannot participate in the first 3 hours of class and is failing the first 3 classes. Those are facts, right? Express your feelings or thoughts about the behavior or situation using I statements, not you. You puts people instantly on the defense. If I say, well, you're letting him stay up too late, or, Jerry, you don't care enough about my time and you obviously didn't want to help me. That's going to put somebody on the defense. The minute they're on the defense, you're no longer going to get anywhere. You're no longer going to have any kind of beneficial conversation because it's shut down. There's a wall and nobody is listening anymore. So when you say I, again, people will argue with I, but it's a lot more difficult because I'm not putting any of this on you necessarily. I'm concerned for your son's ability to graduate if he cannot pass these first 3 classes. I am, I'm really frustrated with, every technique I try to utilize. It doesn't seem to be helping, and I'm exhausted and out of ideas, right? So it's that I rather than you. Specify what behavior outcome you would prefer to happen. So in this example with Jerry, I would like for us to work together on the setup for the next presentation. School example, I would really love it if we could maybe brainstorm some ideas and work together, because I feel like the only way we're going to really help him and identify what we can do is if we kind of just work together and team up on this. because I can't do this without you. And then consequences. You can say both the positive and the negative. The consequences, if we can't figure this out and work together, are that your son might not graduate. And I mean, yes, he could get his GED and there are other options, right? But those aren't the ideal options. He's already got so many credits. I think it'd be so great if we could just get him on track, right? Or if we work together and he sees that we're both on the same page, he might be more motivated and willing to, go to bed earlier. If you're willing to take his phone away, if that's something that is distracting him, oh, man, he might really succeed, right? Be assertive and remember to speak your truth with love. This is my mantra. Speak your truth with love. I had a friend once say, Angie, I am amazed at how many really harsh and difficult conversations you can have with people, with students. I used to work at Children's Hospital too. And I mean, I could have many difficult conversations with people. And they're like, they'd get pissed if I said this to them. Well, the difference, I think, is that I'm not saying the difficult conversation to be a jerk. I'm not saying it to imply that you're a jerk. I'm saying it out of love. Maybe it's love for myself. If I come to my husband or my child and say, hey, bedtime is exhausting. I am really tired trying to get all of the kids to bed, and they're just, all over the place. I can't, it's like corralling cats, right? I really need help. That's love for me and my own personal time. Not saying I don't have love for my husband or my children, but it's like, I got to take care of me too, right? So speaking your truth with love, I had to have a conversation with a young man. He was a foster care student, or he was in foster care, and he was a student in 7th or 8th grade, and he was engaging in inappropriate touching of himself in class. Okay, well, that's a difficult conversation to sit down and be like, hey, bud, let's not touch our privates in class. That makes people uncomfortable. What's going on? Are there some concerns? How can I help you? Like, I get it. Feels good. Cool. But there's a time and there's a place. So my concern was, yeah, I needed him to stop do this. But my concern was also for him. Maybe he doesn't know. Maybe he is itchy down there. Maybe he has body repetitive behaviors and can't stop, grabbing his junk. Maybe he hasn't had anybody sit down and have the appropriate versus inappropriate conversation with him. So there's so many different things, but if I approach him with love and am assertive and just like, this is it, he actually did really well and was able to stop doing that. Thank goodness. But when you are assertive, it does decrease defensiveness. Assertive is not aggressive. There is a fine line. You're also, you can express and communicate your feelings accurately. Ask for what you want and say no to the things you don't want. That's a big one too. How often do we find those conversations to be difficult? Yes, please. When somebody asks for my help and I've needed their help, I don't want to make them feel bad and say, no, I can't do that. But what if I don't have room on my plate to do that? Right? One of the things that helped me, because I was a yes man, a people pleaser. Again, mom, schizophrenia, bipolar. I was quite the people pleaser. So I never said no. And I would find myself being stuck between a rock and a hard place and disappointing people anyway, because I would overcommit to things. And one time I had noticed I wasn't able to answer the call that my friend had called in time. And so rather than this same friend always asking me for this thing, she moved on to somebody else. And that friend was like, oh, yeah, I'd love to help, because that friend rarely got asked for help. And I realized, oh my goodness, if I say no, that also affords someone else an opportunity to have that altruistic feel good feeling of, I got to help. I got to come to the aid of somebody, right? Because it feels good to be the person that's called, unless you're always the person that's called. But we are creatures of habit, and we tend to, call the same people for the same things over and over and over, right? It is only through hard conversations followed by meaningful action that we get anywhere. So have the hard conversations. I mean, look at any sort of systemic change, societal justice, right? Those weren't easy conversations. It's not easy to sit down and tell a parent, I think your child might have a disability. However, let's say you don't have that conversation. Who hurts in the end? The child does. Now, if the parent chooses to disregard or becomes angry and shuts down and pulls their kid out of your school, okay, that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. And I think that's a lot of what we have to get away from, is just because something is difficult and the hopeful outcome that we had was not the actual outcome, doesn't mean that we were wrong. It doesn't mean that we failed. We did what we were supposed to do. And if we think of difficult as growth, growth happens whether you invite it in or you don't, right? It's just kind of the nature of growth. If my 7-year-old daughter, she is very strong and no nonsense. I mean, she will never be walked all over. I can guarantee you that. But this also makes for her she's a difficult friend to have, because you do it my way or no way. I've had several conversations with her about, let's maybe try to work on, sharing, or let's work on, your way is one way and their way is one way. I mean, I've gone through as many conversations as I can. And she's just like, no. Well, I can tell you, there was a day where one of our little neighbor girls came over and wanted to play with my other neighbor girl. And my next door neighbor girl wasn't home. And I said, oh, well, my daughter's inside if you wanted to play with her. And this little girl was like, nah, I'm good. And so, I mean, it's growth, right? My daughter can either choose to continue to go through the world the way she's going, or if she wants to have these friendships, she has to make room for growth. And my daughter is incredible. Please know. So strategies for staying calm and composed during challenging interactions. These are just a few, and these are a lot of my favorites that I utilize. Actually, all of these I utilize. Assume the person is doing their best. That is a big one for me, because if I assume your intention wasn't to hurt me, if I assume you're doing the best you can and you're not just being difficult or angry or reactive or lazy or closed-minded or closed off just because, then my approach to you is a lot softer. It's one of, hey, have you thought about this? Versus, if I assume that you did what you did to hurt my feelings, then I'm going to come in a little more guns blazing, right? And one of the techniques that sometimes helps me with this when it's a really, really difficult adult is seeing them as a child. If I can see them as a child, then a lot of the times what that does for me is it helps me see what maybe they didn't receive as a child, We have way more compassion for, abused and neglected children, and, like the ASPCA, in the arms of the angel, right? All of that. See, karaoke, right? But we have so much more compassion for, those kids and those wounds. But when they become adults, we're like, well, they should know better. But should they? If we can see them as that young child who didn't get something, or is perceiving the world through their trauma backpack, or is just trying to prove that they're enough, or just trying to prove that they do know what they're talking about, or trying to be heard, or whatever it is, then we have a lot more compassion, and the conversation becomes a lot more calm, at least on our side. There was one example. I worked at Children's Hospital as an on-call person, and I was called in late one night when a child had passed away, and his mother, this child had been in the foster care system, and his mother had lost both he and his sister early on. Both of these kids had disabilities and major medical stuff, so they were no stranger to the hospital. The death was questionable, right? It seemed like it was, I don't know, he went in for surgery and then all of a sudden he didn't come out. So there was so much surrounding it. So this woman, she was Black, and she was in a room with all of her friends. And I went into that room because somebody had called social work, right? I hadn't realized, because the security guard was like, "You sure you're okay going in there? You want me to go in there with you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm a social worker. I got this." And I hadn't realized she had just punched the doctor. Okay, so much is happening, right? So much pain, loss, anger, rage, all of this. So I walk into this tiny little room, and instantly I just ask if she needs anything, and whew, she unloaded everything onto me. Everything. I mean, I was this, I was that, I was blah, blah, blah. And she screamed and yelled at me for probably a good 15 minutes. And I just sat there hoping that she didn't punch me, right? And just tried to provide the empathic responding. But what I realized, and what helped me stay calm and composed in that moment, was none of this was about me. This was about her loss. This was about her pain. I represented every childcare worker who took her kids away and didn't allow her to have as much voice and choice in regards to the lives of her children. I represented every nurse and medical doctor that failed her child. I represented every white person that ever judged her or, treated her differently because of her skin color. I knew I represented all of that. And she just needed to unload. And so, I mean, that was the difficult conversation. Even though I really wasn't saying much, I gave her that space. I gave her that freedom to express all of the things in a safe way that she wouldn't have been able to express to many other people, right? If she had gone off on her caseworker, her caseworker perhaps may have responded negatively, thus reinforcing all of these negative feelings and not actually releasing them. And so sometimes that difficult growth conversation is just holding that space, right? And validating, and validating. I couldn't imagine anything that she was going through. I can't imagine what it's like to be a woman of color. I can't imagine what it's like to have lost my children to the system and no longer have a voice. I can't imagine all of a sudden getting a call and finding out that my son has died. I can't imagine any of this. So validating that her feelings were so valid, right? Couldn't think of a better word. Sorry for using the same word. I can tell you by the end of it, we were both crying together and hugging, and we got along great, and it was great. Because I knew it wasn't about me. So and that's taking a step back and realizing it's not about you. right? And as teachers and as school personnel, social workers, it's so easy for us to assume that when a parent is coming at us, they're questioning our ability to do our job. But they're not. They're feeling helpless. They're feeling powerless. They're feeling as though they've let their child down or the world has let their child down. They're feeling panicked because they want their child to succeed. And here's this roadblock, right? It could also be from them not getting their needs when they went to school. But if you can see them as the individual expert of whatever space that they're holding. Someone once said to me, when you take your kids to the doctor, yes, the doctor knows information, medical information, but you are the expert on your child. And that really stuck with me because then it made it where I didn't have to just sit there and let the doctor misdiagnose my child with pink eye when I knew it wasn't pink eye. I knew it was tear duct issues, which she later then had to have tear duct surgery, right? But I was the expert on her and I knew what pink eye looked like. So it wasn't that I was questioning his expertise. It was more of like, well, I just really, are you sure? That doesn't feel right. I know my child, that doesn't feel right. So when you can see that individual, the parent or the child that you're working with as the expert on what they know and what they're comfortable with, then it becomes both of you just trying to teach one another. Allow the parents, allow your colleagues, allow your students to teach you about their world. I mean, when you truly think about it, we have this tiny little snapshot about the world. You guys know that my mom has schizophrenia and bipolar. But does that tell you anything about my life growing up with her? It gives you a little bit of an idea, but it doesn't give you the full picture. Thus, you could respond to me as though my life looked the exact same as your life if you had a parent with that, or as your friend's life, but that's not an accurate picture. Allow me to be the expert and inform you. Look for common ground. Find that commonality. When you're having a difficult conversation with a parent, what is the common ground? The child, the student. I hear that you really want Tim to get better at math. I do too. Very much. I just don't see how we can do that when we don't have enough staff right now. I know there's some liability stuff too when it comes to IEPs and yada, yada, but that common ground just kind of, sometimes it just, it allows somebody who is starting to feel tense, like, you know what? Yes. You care about him too? Because it's easy for us to assume that you don't if you don't want to fulfill his needs. Take a break. That's why it's so important to recognize your body. Sometimes it might be pre-teaching. It might be, if I'm a parent coming into an IEP meeting, it could be, hey, I tend to get really passionate about this. And sometimes I get to a point where I can no longer see straight. And if that happens, I'm not going to be able to solve any problem. So I'm going to have to step away. I just don't want you to hear that I don't want you to take offense to it. I don't want you to think it's anything you're doing. I just get really, really upset about the issues within the entire education system, right? We all could talk for hours about that. Find trends within your similar reactions. So this one is a big one. If you are constantly responding or feeling triggered by a certain type of person or a certain phrase or just a certain moment, that's a growth opportunity for you. Sorry, I know it's uncomfortable. I'll give you an example. Crazy. Crazy was my word. Call me crazy. And I'm flying off like, excuse me, what did you just call me? because that was a trigger word. Why? Duh. I didn't want to be anything like my mom. Do you know how hard and how long it took me to even connect those two dots? Are you kidding? It seems so simple, but I couldn't see it. It was just, I'm not crazy, right? I had to recognize, wow, if somebody calls me crazy, even in, a friendly term, I get really, really pissed. Why? Why does that come up for me? Why is that bringing that up for me, right? This allows you to move forward and it gives you even more power over these difficult conversations moving down the line, because they can't use that against you. Now, call me crazy all day and I don't care, whatever. Yeah, I am crazy. Look at me. I've got wild hair and, I do all sorts of crazy things, but like put peanut butter, those frozen peanut butter and jellies on the driveway when it's sunny until my kids' dinner will be served in 20 minutes. ADHD. So I don't like to cook. Read between the lines. What are they not saying? When you're having this difficult conversation, what is the person not telling you? What is their body language telling you? What is their tone of voice telling you? What is their face telling you? When you can read between the lines, it also can help you usher in open-ended questions. When I mentioned that we didn't have an extra math tutor, I saw you put your head down and kind of, cross your legs and clench your fists. What are your thoughts with that? Like, what is that bringing up for you? If you pay attention to beyond the words, then you're allowing that open dialogue that helps get you to the outcome. And of course, speaking your truth with love. Oh, and breathing through your feet. So a good friend of mine, she always says, breathe through your feet. And you can use any breathing technique. I mean, so I used to tell my students doing the finger tapping, because nobody can really see it. You can do it under the table. I'm a nail biter. But breathing through your feet, you can do it while you're sitting. You can do it while you're standing. You can do it really big. You can do it really small. So you just picture straws, like holes in the bottom of your feet, straws going to the center of the earth, all the way up through your body to your head and back down. So when you breathe in, you are breathing in the center of the earth through your head, through the straws to the top of your head, and you breathe out and it goes back down to the center of the earth. And you can do this as many times as you need. And what that does is that helps ground you. It helps connect you to the earth. Because sometimes when we start getting those big feelings, those big emotions, we're like flying in the sky, like, pew, pew, wanting to take down everybody. We're like a bomber ship. Ground yourself and remind yourself, of your body, feel your body. So those are just a couple techniques. There's so many more, and if you guys have any additional ideas of how you stay calm and composed, please feel free to share them in the chat, because I can guarantee you other people could benefit from them. We are all just reflections playing a part within the growth of another. When we understand this, truly understand this, we come to realize there are no difficult conversations, only loving conversations where we both give and receive the grace necessary for growth. In my life, I have really relied on people to call me out on things, and some of my, perhaps childhood negative responses, so that I could grow. Because if we went through life and no one ever challenged us, or no one ever, invited change into our life, or perhaps criticized what we were doing because it wasn't beneficial, then we don't know. And that's the beauty of this reflection. I reflect back to you areas that you can grow, and you reflect back to me areas that I can grow. And when you really are able to play that dance with people, and think about the people in your life, who are the ones that it could be a sibling, it could be a spouse, it could be a friend, it could be a child. Who are the ones that you can really do that dance well with, where you can call them up and say, oh my gosh, let me tell you about this situation. Am I right? Am I wrong? Tell me where I screwed up. Tell me where I need to improve. Tell me what's going on. What do I need to heal? Go, right? And they can do the same. It's no longer this painful interaction. Unfortunately, so many of the children that you're working with, so many of their parents that you're working with, they have not had that graceful interaction with anyone. In fact, I can tell you at the behavioral school I worked at, pretty much 99% of the parents did not know how to have that dance. So it really, really required me to maintain my calm and collection so that I could provide that information or provide that experience for them, to show them it is okay. You can feel safe to express your feelings, but guess what? There's also another way where you can express your feelings, and I could have heard you just fine that way. You do you, but moving forward, other people might not be a little as graceful or as gracious as I was when you were yelling and screaming at me and calling me names, right? So that is how to have difficult conversations. Again, this is my opinion. This is my insights. There is no right or wrong way, as long as you are coming from a place of love and compassion. So whatever that looks like for you, do it. But I truly do invite you to start seeing them as growth opportunities, because it will lessen your fear and change your mindset. Because to watch someone grow, I mean, that's why you're in education. You want to watch kids grow. So to watch someone grow and become, their best self, or become even better than they were yesterday, as painful as that can be, is one of the most beautiful things you can witness in this human journey. And we can't do it without each other. So I am incredibly grateful for all of you to be here today. I am going to share in the chat the link. You can also follow this QR code to a survey. Really, really invite you to please take this survey. Feel free. You can provide me with critical feedback. You can also provide me with positive feedback. I'd love either one. It just helps me become stronger and better as a person. And if there are any, final questions or comments or insights, I know I have it to where you can't unmute, but if you want to write it down in the chat, I will hang on for 5 more minutes, and I'm more than willing to answer as best as I can. So thank you guys so much. If this is the last time I see you, have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.